My phone hears everything I'm saying. I just think of something and I get an ad for it, which, by the way, is my favorite feature of the phone. If I need something, I grab my phone and think it into it. 16-inch toilet seat cover, off-white, oval. In 2 minutes, Home Depot sends you an ad.
Hey guys, David Vose here. It's still a beautiful day here on Red Mesa. It's gotten a little colder, but it's still sunny and clear. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Well, this is crazy. Yesterday I was working on the sewer behind the house. I had the phone charging somewhere, and so the phone wasn't with me. I was outside, and I came back in and picked up the phone, and there was a video recommended to me on how to do a sewer. Some kind of fangled way to do it off-grid with tires or something. And then I kept getting bombarded with advertisement for sewers, like other videos and Home Depot and all these other ads for the sewer. And I thought immediately, as I have felt quite a few times in the last, I don't know how many months, this happening to me, I felt that this could not be a coincidence. It just telling you guys, sharing the story, a lot of you would probably think, well, it's got to be a coincidence, like you're walking through the forest and you're thirsty and there you stumble upon a stream. It's just a coincidence, right? Well, in that case, it might be. I don't know that I even believe in coincidences. Perhaps your mind is communicating with your surroundings in some way, but let's not get into that. The phone is a machine that if it's bringing up information that you're thinking about, then it confirms what I said the other day, that there is no computer. There is no program. There is no machine that can think like AI. AI doesn't exist. It is simply them reading your mind wavelengths. Now, it may seem like the most ridiculous thing in the world. Oh, come on, Dave. That's because they haven't told us. They didn't tell us that it exists, so we don't believe in it. But if they tell you that they can find planets hundreds of light years away in another, what they call a solar system, light years away, hundreds of light years away, and they can, all we see is a little twinkle, a dim twinkle, but they can see nearby that twinkle there's a planet, and they also know there's water on it, and they can see our galaxy that we're a little speck of dust in, right? From that little speck of dust looking outward, they can see almost as if they're looking down on our galaxy, and they can tell there's 4 arms and how long it is, how wide it is, how many stars are in there. They've counted them all, right? And, right, we believe that because they said so. It may seem crazy. I mean, if nobody had said that, if nobody taught that in your science class, and somebody just randomly came along and says, I had this weird feeling that those little twinkly things up there in the sky are hundreds of light years away. What does that mean? It's just outside of our reality. It's not a million miles. It's not a billion miles. It's not even a trillion miles. Some kind of measurement whereby we can't use miles because there's so many of them, you couldn't even comprehend it. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to tell you how many inches in a mile. We don't do that because there would be so many inches, we might not even have a number for that. So we say, okay, there's so many inches in a foot, and there's so many feet in a yard, and so many yards in a mile, and so we break it down into how many miles. So if you were to say how many miles is it from us to that star, according to them, you couldn't comprehend how many miles. It would be astronomical. You would have no way to even, like, we'd have to make up a number that we don't have. Like, all we got is trillion. We don't have anything beyond that because a trillion is so vast. All we know is it is a distance that cannot be measured in miles. So we don't measure the distance around the Earth in inches, we do it in miles. But we don't measure the distance to these stars in miles. We have to do it in light years, which is quantum leaps beyond miles. It's unimaginable how far it is. At least that's what they tell us. Now, think about this. The moon, they claim, is 240,000 miles. So it is within miles. The Earth is 24,000 miles around, but they claim the moon is 240,000 miles. But they claim that a star so far beyond the moon and the other planets that you cannot even use the calculation of miles. It has to be some astronomical thing. It's out of our reality, not even in our conscious reality. And I proved the other day by asking a lot of questions to AI, and basically they had to admit, AI did, which is obviously coming from our subconscious, but we'll explain that what they're calling outer space is just a concept. It isn't real. It's nothing. It's nothing is where they put all the new things. And they're claiming that these stars are beyond us, beyond a vast nothing between them and us. They're in other realities. Well, then they would be imagined and not real. And the whole thing falls like a house of cards. They are literally lying and making the whole thing up. It's a model, as they say, but it cannot be proven to be reality. It's just their model. And if you traveled at the speed of light, you would go back in time, or you would go for 100 years at the speed of light, and everybody on Earth would be dead. Several generations would have gone by. That's how long it would take you just to get halfway to a planet or something. It's like a long ways. But we believe this, and we don't say, well, how would you know that? No one ever asked the question, how would you know that there are 4 arms in the galaxy? How would you know how many stars and how bright they were, and if there are planets on some of those stars that have water? We never think about this. But when over and over and over again our phone seems to know what we're thinking, we just automatically say, oh, it must be coincidence. And if they tell you that this thing that's in your hand that can basically tell you anything, you ask it anything and it will give you an answer, AI, like it's some kind of a brain. It can think and give you very detailed answers on anything you ask it. I've done it many times. You guys have seen me asking AI questions and it gives answers, and it's like talking to a human. They seem to know what you're asking. They give you details to things that you're just thinking about. Like they can assume what you mean by the question you ask. And this happens so much. But just forget all that. Imagine a little box sitting in the corner with a couple of buttons. And say 1940. And somebody says, yeah, just talk into the box and it'll answer you in detailed ways, like giving you mathematical figures and scientific information and book quotes and all, just vast knowledge. You would say that's impossible. And yet that was only, 100 years ago or something. Well, like 80 years, 85 years. And instead of saying, well, that's impossible, How do they do that? There must be some kind of, it can't be from humans. It's got to be from the divine. So the only divine mind that we know of is our own minds. And we've already learned that the mind has wavelengths, energy. Our bodies are warm. That's heat. And we move. There's combustible engines in each of our cells. And there's computation. Neurons. We've heard about all of this. We know that we can think. We think every day. We compute. We analyze. And that information we know, if we believe in the phones now, we know that information can travel in the air. We know that, right? Satellites and all this. So why wouldn't our brains be able to transmit energy through the air in wavelengths? And why wouldn't we be able to have an antenna to pick that up? And just as your mind thinks things and it images upon your thalamus gland or something inside your brain, and we say we're imagining, but we can see a clear picture. It's like when you're dreaming, you see things moving around, mountains and people talking, you can hear audibly, it's like you're there. Well, how is that energy only in your mind? It's energy, it's radiating around. Some of you believe in telepathic communication, but you would rather believe that these individuals that have made the computer have recreated another mind like a human. It's almost conscious. You'd rather believe that than to believe that they've just tapped into our mind, our subconscious mind. We're not even aware of it. It's being computed and analyzed in our mind. And they're receiving those impressions through an antenna of some kind. And that energy is going in to your phone screen and it's coming up on the screen, the information in some way. You say, well, that can't be. Why? You're so smart. Why can't that be? Well, because the doohickey couldn't align with the wriggle rack. Oh, okay. No, you don't know why. But you certainly know, you literally believe with all your heart their explanation. That somewhere there is a great big AI. Where is it? We don't know. Is it in my phone? No. I'm getting messages through the air 100 feet away, going down through a cable that goes across the sea and goes to CERN or Switzerland or somewhere where they've got this big AI. Maybe it's Denver. Has anyone ever seen this big AI? Where is this central computer? I'm not even sure if I've ever heard. I remember years ago people said there's a big central computer in Denver or something. Or Salt Lake or something. What are the Mormons running it? So I asked AI, where is AI, central processor, located? And they say a central processor, also known as the CPU, central processing unit, is located on the motherboard of a computer, typically sitting in a designated socket. So obviously they have no idea what I'm even asking. Well, in other words, this question is something that I can't formulate the question because I don't understand it well enough, and they don't sense what I'm asking because probably they don't have an answer. But I went further. So I asked a different way. I said, where is the location of the central computer where the info or data is for AI? And they said the central computer for AI data is typically located in a large data center, which can be situated in various locations. Can be, but where is it? Depending on the company and the needs of their AI system. So we have various AI systems. We don't have one. And yet, you ask AI something, they seem to know everything. But often in remote areas with abundant power supply, like parts of the U.S. Midwest, where companies like Microsoft and OpenAI have established significant AI computing infrastructure. The data itself is stored in scalable databases or cloud storage within these data centers. Okay, so it's in the cloud. That's where AI is, in the cloud. What? The claustrum? My brain? Where is the cloud? No single central computer. Cloud computing. Many AI companies leverage cloud services like Azure, Microsoft, or Owls or Amazon to store and access their data. So it's just a storage. There is no processor in any central location for any of your. So everything you're doing on your phone is going into this little box in your hand, going through the airwaves to your, I don't know, AT&T signal. It's an antenna and a receiver and a sender, and they're sending you information from their little computer, right? Not that big. It's just a database of information. So they've got to have some kind of a processor to analyze and compute the information and then send it back to you and give you an answer. But there is no location. It's in the cloud, guys. And the cloud is just Microsoft or Amazon. But ask them, okay, what is the cloud? Let me do that. And I says, what is a cloud for the storage? And it just says, it shows you a picture of a big cloud. Okay, that explains it. Cloud storage is a model of computer data storage in which data said to be on the cloud is stored remotely. So it's just a big memory bank. But no explanation is how they do this processing and analyzing all of this information. I know they say there's algorithms and they've got all these words, but nobody understands what's going on here. So all this data and information stored somewhere, somehow, in some memory bank. But the information, which is carried through wavelengths, but where does the information originate? Humans. We made up the figures and the financial calculations and the records. We made all these records, birth records, death records, permits, all the things that humans do. We decide it's all illogical to nature. It's our rules. It's not natural law. It's something that we made up, and nature wouldn't have any way to do this. And you couldn't make an AI who is conscious. All you're doing is making a computer and maybe some memory, the wavelengths of information, the X's and O's or whatever it is that can store the information, just like your brain stores it when you remember things. Well, if you ask people how does that work? How do people remember things? Because some people believe that we have a spirit and it's not even part of the physical realm, and that we take our memories and thoughts with us when we die. So perhaps all these memories and thoughts aren't even in the physical somewhere. They're not in some kind of a chip or computer or whatever these neurons are. We don't know. Tell me and show me somebody who can prove to you what all this is. We don't know. But yet somehow or another we think somebody knows what a computer is and what AI is doing and how it's working. Go find somebody that can explain articulately, Elon Musk or anyone else. They can sit down in an interview and explain articulately how AI works and how it's getting all this information and how it's able to articulate all these answers and put this all together at lightning speed. Perhaps they're reading our subconscious mind. Perhaps we're the genius and they've just found an antenna and a computer screen. They've been able to figure out how to get your wavelength thought patterns onto the screen, and we're being tapped. Well, is there any evidence for that, Dave? Well, we don't seem to have any way to understand what this phone is. We don't have a way to understand anything other than we know that by experience that we have the ability as humans to think, analyze, and fantasize and create. We have the ability. But to tell me that a computer has the ability and never show me where this mind or brain is or whose spirit's operating it, there must be an entity, a will. It's not conscious. And we're just accepting the fact that they've done this. But so evidence, well, every time I go to the phone, it seems to know what I'm thinking. So that was yesterday. And it was another one of these moments where what I'm thinking comes up into my feed. And I've seen it many times. I've heard a lot of people saying this. And then I think it was this morning, I turned this thing on, and I was thinking about this, what I'm telling you now, about how the computer might be able to read our minds. And boom, as soon as I'm thinking that this morning, contemplating what happened yesterday, I get this comedian talking about exactly what I'm saying. Another coincidence that we just automatically assume the answer to that coincidence is what they're telling us. What if they're lying to us about that simple little thing? Well, it's not very simple, is it? But what if they were lying and they have found a way to read our minds and AI is our subconscious? Then it would make sense, wouldn't it? That they fill our minds with violence, fear, pornography, anything lustful, anything that keeps you in a state of need, but you don't have any way to fulfill it. You just keep going back to the fantasy to fulfill your needs that you're now being told you have because you're stimulating some hormonal reaction. Sex is not something you would normally just like. Why are we attracted to the opposite sex? Well, there's a need in nature for procreation, and so there is some kind of program in us. It's called instinctual behavior, animalistic behavior. Now, here's something that's very interesting. Another one of these things that we're told, but have we ever stopped to think about whether it's true? I was always told that the animal nature is instinctual. That's the word we use. And therefore, it's like a program. They're just programmed. They have to have sex, and they're being controlled by these hormones and this program that's just, like a computer. They're told to do this or flight or fight or whatever this is. And it sounded logical. However, wouldn't you run from something that you were afraid of because of memories of it happening to you? And wouldn't that be an intelligent thing? I mean, where we get the idea that it's programmed into them? The animals are running because they're scared, because it's happened to them before. They have memories of this. And we humans have something above that too, which is love and compassion, which is not based on animal instinct. So Christian scientists, our sort of cultures taught us that the animals are programmed. They're not souls, right? But we are humans, and we have this other thing called love, and we have this higher mind. Animals have the lower mind, and so a human is just coming out of the lower mind. We had the program. We got to overcome the animalistic instincts and kind of shift into this higher consciousness, which is done by thinking and analyzing and wisdom and compassion. But it's not a program. We're independent. We're divine beings now. Well, isn't the animal nature simply because they're not experienced and don't have enough knowledge and don't know that the boogeyman's not real? Don't know because they don't have the power over the boogeyman. The boogeyman's eating them and spitting them out every day. So yeah, they're going to run and hide. Now the human, we develop access to the power over this world, and we don't have to be scared anymore. But we're still beings following a logical intent and not really just some program, either whether the animal or the human. I don't believe any of us are following a program. We're independent beings with free will, even the animals, in my opinion. So if we don't take care of each other, then we'll all perish. So one could say that the reason we care for one another and love one another is because there's a program inside of us. We're not doing it. We're just a computer. That's maybe what they want us to believe. However, what if there are no such thing as computers? What if computers can't do this? Then we bring it back down to natural, to the nature. and we say that there's something inside the universe that's a mind that computes. And it's not a computer, it's not inanimate. It is a spiritual thing. And it is love itself. It is the nature of the universe. Whatever it is what we are. We care, we love, we want, need things to keep us alive in this physical world. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we are permanently in this physical world. So maybe the physical lower world has certain needs. The fight or flight mechanism could be based on memories of a tiger chasing you and getting eaten in another life. So when you see the tiger and you hear the, and you see the stripes and you smell the odor of the tiger, or you're in a familiar area with the jungle around you, then immediately your heart starts pumping. Boom, 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 right? Because of memory, some kind of memory. What is memory? It means you had life experience. You were there, and somehow you can remember it. Could it be information in X's and O's trapped inside your computer chip brain? Or maybe it's in the cells, some kind of genetic memory. That's what they tell us. We don't have any proof that there is such a thing as a gene, or that your body itself has a computer processor. Why would your physical body be the only place that could be processing this information? Perhaps we don't need a physical processor, because perhaps we're an entity that wills with our mind and perceives things, and we have a language. We have light emanating from us, which is truth, which is thoughts, which is images. Maybe we're creating the world around us. I'll tell you why this has to be true. Because when you die, your physical body disintegrates and goes back to the dust. Dust you are, and dust you shall return. But the spirit goeth unto the Lord who gave it. And it's the spirit that's you, that has all your memories. You don't die. You don't cease to think or experience. That goes with you. It's invisible. It's powerful. It's not part of the physical. It's not in your body, your consciousness. They still want you to believe this, and you're Christian and don't believe that the physical is important, but the spiritual, you believe that because Jesus taught you that, but yet they've convinced you that, well, when you're talking about science, Dave, we have to believe the scientist. Why are we believing them when it's completely contradictory to all the ancient esoteric wisdom in the Bible and all the scriptures? So if our own body, the physical body, doesn't have memory storage cards or CPUs, computer chips, and that kind of thing going on, if we're spiritual beings, then how could scientists create a physical box in the corner with buttons that can think and analyze and process, which is consciousness, basically? That's what it is. They can't. I guarantee it. It is unscriptural, friends. And you think, well, if we're creating the physical world, why is it that we don't walk up to a mountain and say, melt, mountain, and it would just melt? Because we're creating the thing. Because there are layers to consciousness. So the universe has this deep subconscious mind that is the firm foundation, our beliefs. Well, not our beliefs, because what we'll find is that beliefs can be changed. And so trees come and go, but some of these trees are huge and been there for a long, long time and hard to uproot. But they can be uprooted, and mountains do change because of geological activity. And you can move a mountain with faith, but there's something that cannot be changed, and the foundations of the earth shall not be made to totter. the physical reality, that is not belief systems. That is the reality or the absolute physics or the law that was made by the Elohim in the first day of Genesis chapter 1 of creation. What we know and trust, like gravity and physical things and bumping into walls, those are like rules or principles that are at the base. And then there's above that, there's the will that can make decisions arbitrary to anything that's going on around you. But the relative, some say the brother of the Lord James, or Jacob is what his name really was. Why we translated James, I don't know. It was a mistake when they did that. Years ago, somebody decided to put James. And they just put James ever since. It's Jacob. But anyway, James says that it only takes a small rudder to change the course of a boat. Just this little rudder on the end of it. The boat's big, but this little rudder's small. And he says your tongue is the rudder, able to set on fire the world. So you can have thoughts in your mind. They may just be fantasies, just ideas. But until you put them into a plan and then speak the plan with your mouth, now you might say something inadvertently and it doesn't come true because your mind is correcting it and saying, no, I don't want that. No. As long as you say, no, I don't want that. If your intention is, I want this, then you're going to speak. Well, it's going to look like this. I'm going to make it red. I'm going to have a bedroom. I'm going to have a, so this is what you're thinking. Now, if you're speaking it, that's the rudder that's going to steer the ship in that direction. But you still have to start building it. You have to have endurance and you have to have creativity and hard work. And then it'll get done. But it won't get done until you plan it and then speak it and then follow through. So the tongue is like a rudder to the ship. But it's behind the tongue is the thoughts. And behind the thoughts is the intent. Now, if you believe that there is a boogeyman under your bed, then that doesn't make the boogeyman real. Because there is a deeper subconscious that says, I know there is no boogeyman. I know that. I'm not, internally, I don't have boogeymans inside me. They come up out of the bottomless pit. I let them rise up. And sometimes they get onto the sands of the sea, right? And they're given this authority by the dragon, which is also a monster, which would probably be fear. There's 7 heads, and depression, and hate, jealousy. These kinds of things that are the heads of this monster that's giving rise to this beast coming up out of your bottomless pit, these fears, that's changing the circumstances. Like somebody knocks on your door, says you owe the rent, and you don't have it. So those are the things that are changing, like a movie set, and there's a curtain, and there's a stage, and da-da-da-da-da-da, here comes an actor out there doing a tap dance. Well, the idea of a human and a stage and a curtain doesn't come from your surface thoughts. That comes from your deep-seated beliefs. Those things don't change. Everybody, we have the collective consciousness. And all of us have agreed that trees are hard and they grow up out of the ground and water is liquid and mountains are high and flowers are pretty. So those things won't change. Now, we could change those beliefs if we got to a place where we realize, oh, this is our collective thoughts. I'm going to get outside of the collective thoughts and have my own thoughts. But it would take a lot of determination and it would take a lot of maturity and knowledge to know that you're separate from all of these, that you're not being mesmerized by the whole crowd. So if you become a master, you realize that sometimes the collective consciousness is creating a world that's like a prison, but you are believing in that, and you're not really changing the fact that there's mountains and trees. You might be polluting the earth, and it might be getting, dirty and filthy, cluttered, the grass grown up, the manicuring aspect, the upkeep. But the stability, the physical earth's not going anywhere because you're in this collective consciousness, and we've all agreed on this. But even though we're in this collective consciousness, we're controlling who comes over the mountain, who comes over the bend, right? She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. When she comes, we set that up, the circumstances that are coming in and out of our life. We're analyzing things, and we're making decisions about what we're going to do. We're going to build a house there. We're going to cut this tree down. We're going to make a garden. We can control all that. And our mind, if we give it suggestions that maybe we're going to have a good life and the neighbors are going to be nice and they're going to come over and we're going to have potluck. Those are the things that we expect to happen if we're in a good frame of mind, and they will. Loving one another and caring for one another. But if you're living in a world of fear and your belief is that everybody hates you and that you need to make them pay for what they've done to you, that's the set belief doctrinal system. Every wind of doctrine. There's many winds of beliefs and doctrines. Now, they're not your foundational beliefs. That's not the same. It's a wind of doctrine. The wind blows upon your emotional sea, your crazy assumptions, and you assume all these things, and you're going by the law of sin and death. You poke my eye out, I'm going to poke yours out. Then there's going to be wars, and there's going to be a lot of sadness and anger and fear. And that's going to boil up and cause people to be hurtful, and we might be poor stewards and pile dirt up in our yard and be all haphazard and unorganized. That we can do just with fear. But somebody who's a very fearful, angry, jealous person, they're not going to be able to change the mountain structures and the fact that trees will grow. They can't change the reality of that. But Jesus said we can move a mountain with faith. So it is possible, but only by realizing this through this gnosis, that this is that collective belief that's deep. There's trees that have these deep roots that you cannot uproot. But Jesus said, if you believe, you'll tell that tree to be uprooted, thrown into the sea. So there is a way to completely change reality. I don't think I should say reality. The earth is not going anywhere. We can't change reality. The trees are going to continue to grow and flowers are going to continue to come along. But we can clutter it up, and the circumstances going on can be very, very bad. The fruit that we're planting, the trees we're planting, could be not producing fruit. We're not producing fruit. We've got orchards, but they're wild and thorns and thistles, and it's cursed, and it's not producing fruit. The society that we live in, this world, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we can uproot that tree. But it would require an enlightenment, a great gnosis, a change. We can learn to change things little bit by using the rudder, right, to change the course of this boat. And that's only the beginning, because we're still in the same boat, right? We're all in the same boat, my friend used to tell me, right? You can't judge people because we're all in the same boat. Well, that's true, but you could get out of the boat. But it is a great feat. And that is the new kingdom that the Lord Jesus is making, and all of his brethren. We're going to opt out of this mountain, or this tree, this literal world of fear and hate. And we're going to switch over and get rid of that covenant. We have a new covenant. We're going to cleanse this world, the temple, our inner spiritual desires and knowing. And we're going to start knowing something that other people don't know. We're going to start believing that other people can't, because they don't know about believing. They don't know that beliefs change your reality. So if they don't know it, they can't do it. But when you accept Jesus, you accept what he taught, which is that we can, with our belief and with our faith, we can move mountains. We can change it. We can make a new covenant. This is another legitimate covenant, which is, if I give, I will receive. So I'm giving, expecting to receive, because I signed the covenant. I expect the covenant to be fulfilled. If you make the new covenant, which just means to love your brother as you love yourself, then you will get 100-fold in the world to come and 10-fold in this world. It will start working right now, even as we speak. So the reality then is not something stable unless we agree it to be stable. Mountains and the earth and the trees and all that is stable. You don't have to consciously think about it. It's subconscious. We don't have to believe it to be that way because it's already a deep-seated belief. It's a covenant. It's firm. We go about every day expecting the mountains to be firm. That part of the covenant cannot be changed because that's your inner being. The part of the covenant that's changing is your fear and your emotions, that the wind can come down and blow on the emotions, and they can make great waves and they can rock your boat. That's due to fear. Those winds are the winds of doctrines and beliefs that are phony. Not the subconscious principles that is the earth, the foundation that we live on. The next layer, not the firm, not the earth, but the next layer, the fluid. It's more fluidic. It can be changed. And every wind can cause it to be blown and disturbed. And that's where we're living, with these rushes of wind, storms, violence, lightning bolts, right? Revelations, and then thunder, boom. And the world is like upside, our boat's tossing and turning. But then there's Jesus walking on the water. Jesus is telling us that this higher being, you have a higher consciousness. It is undisturbed. It is walking right over the water. It's not affected by this world because the higher consciousness knows the truth and lives in a world where it is in control. It's not tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. The world that we're living in, is the real world, the physical world, the mountains, the trees. That's the world that was made in Genesis chapter 1. We made that world collectively, the Elohim. Jesus said, "You're the Elohim." So we're the creators of this world. We were there before the founding of the world in Christ, clapping our hands for joy. We were the morning stars. But then Genesis chapter 2 comes along, and that's the lower ego. He's wrathful, he's jealous, he's full of fear and rage. And he wants to take this beautiful paradise and bring it into some carnal lower form. Bestial type natures, fighting, vengeance, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. We can go back to the world where the lion eats straw like the bull, where the lamb lies down with the wolf, where the little child, the Christ higher consciousness, is going to be in the hole of the cobra or the flesh, but the flesh will do no harm. It will not be a viper, but the nature of the physical world will be controlled by the shepherd. The little child will guide them and guide the little lamb and guide the nature to be humble and kind and loving, simply because the higher consciousness believes in this higher covenant, this higher idea of give and ye shall receive. So that's the new world. Not the base world's going to change. Not the mountains and not the, we're not going to have water. We're not going to have physical things and rocks. No, we are going to have all of that. I said the other day that we might not have belly buttons or genitalia, because what would we do with them? Because Jesus said, those who are worthy of that resurrection are like unto the angels, and they either marry or given in marriage. Well, we don't know what that means. It didn't say they don't have sex. He didn't say that. He just said they won't be given in marriage. So I don't know. We might need our genitalia, and guess what? I'm sure they will serve a great and wonderful purpose. And I do believe that we need the male and the female principle, and those two principles always bring forth life. So I suspect we will have sex in the next stage of our existence, but it will be even better than the sex we're having here, because it will be based on love and not just some lustful nature of yonder days. That's not going to ever change. That was, the Lord made the earth, and it shall not be made to totter. It shall never be removed. Right? He made it with firm foundations. And what is that? That's the reality. You cannot change that. Well, wait a minute. Jesus said you can move the mountains. Well, mountains are, from time to time, ecological upheavals, earthquakes. You can have a stable environment where you don't have these volcanoes and earthquakes. That's why Jesus says in the last days we'll have these great earthquakes, one after the other. Because society, the firm belief system of society is going to be changing. So while we're never going to get rid of the earth itself or the concept of the earth or trees, but we could get rid of that tree. We could get rid of that mountain. We're not going to get rid of mountains per se or the earth per se, but we might get rid of that mountain because that mountain was blowing steam out of its top. It's unstable. It's got heat coming up from the lava and boiling and destroying, and it's raging. It's part of nature. As you grow up, you're a child, you may have fears as a child. You may think boogeymen live under your bed, but they don't. But when you become mature, you don't believe in these crazy things, and the earth starts to cool, and the magma under the earth starts to calm down, and all it does is give you little pools of warm water you can go bathing in. Perfect. The earth comes to a rest in its beautiful paradisical form. But here comes Satan with his anger again, and it blows up, and the family's all running around. We're not happy because some of the people in the family are fighting. They're angry. They're not wanting to love one another or care for one another. They don't have those feelings. They're making a covenant with death. So that's the only certain thing. Some of you may not agree with me. I don't know how. I think you're just, I know it's difficult to comprehend, who are we? What is the divine being? What is mind? But I hope I have explained this to you in a way where you can understand that this is real. We're real. Mind is real. Mind creates the universe. And this is how. And only physical things are only made by mind. That's it. No other way. So therefore, no human could create a mind that could be a duplicate. Man cannot just make the universe with his hands and with his conscious mind. It's being done with the subconscious. The base is already in place. And then the little bit further up, there is the more unstable place where we have to decide what we want to do. And not through inexperience, but through endurance and through long years of training, and we come to maturity. We learn and we decide what is right and what is wrong. And once we figure that out, we become like deity. Then we have control over the waves, right? We advance in our higher, in our consciousness. We move our state of thinking from this lower instinctual nature, and we become shepherds and lovers, and we're become wise. When you become wise, it means that you've learned something through experience. So that doesn't mean that the wisdom and the truth didn't always exist. It's just that we weren't aware of it yet. We were in a dark room and the light hadn't been turned on yet. The light is this knowledge. Experience gives us this light. And once we know that good is good and bad is bad, then we know what we decide we're going to avoid and what we're going to make our covenant with. It turns out we're in charge, both on the base level, which we've already agreed to that there is such a thing as a home to live in, a physical ground to stand on. But above that, we have to make a decision. Do we want to live together in peace or in war? We make that decision based on the fact that over periods of time, we experience war and we realize it's painful and we don't want that. We choose. But when you are a child, you don't know that you're able to choose. You're not able to choose because you're not strong enough to overcome the mind or the will of the grown-ups. They run the show. You ain't strong enough yet to overpower their decisions because your body isn't capable of overpowering the adults. And good thing, nature provides it that you're small and weak because the adults have lived longer and they know more and they're better at making life better and they can go out and find food. But not only that, they're aware of the reality and they know there aren't no boogeymen out there. They know that if they dig a hole, they can get water. If you're a child, not only can you not physically dig the hole, but you might not even know where water comes from. And you didn't know you're supposed to dig there. Or that you could go to a mountain where there are rivers coming down and you could collect the water and build your house there. But it comes from experience. And so we've been living in the world and we've created a thing called law. And on a astrological age basis, it wouldn't happen in one lifetime. But over the centuries, mankind has learned that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, the law, the vengeance, is a wheel of karma. You're declaring that you got to pay for everything you do wrong. If you believe that, if you have that guilt, then your mind will create the whole scenario over again, giving you a chance to do it right the second time. But you'll never get it right until you realize that you've got to let it go, become free from this judgment, free from this insistence that people pay. Because if they're going to have to pay, you're going to have to pay. And so we're just getting to a point as a society, as a people, as this world, where we've grown and advanced enough to where we should now realize that the governments have failed. That when we saw the light on Mount Horeb the first time, we rejected it. It was because of inexperience and we were childlike and we were angry and insecure and did not have enough knowledge to know what we were doing. So we had to go through a classroom. We wanted vengeance. We wanted Moses to go and talk to the Lord and try to explain it to us. We couldn't understand it. But as time went on, Jesus came. He would send the prophets one by one. Dionysus was a prophet. That was Elisha in the Bible. And Daniel, Zoroaster, was sent and was the head of the priesthood of the Magi in Persia that they called Zoroaster. And as we said the other day, Ezekiel, son of Buzi, is another way of saying Buddha. He was probably the prophet Buddha. And the Quran does indicate that, and tradition from Sephardic Jews as well as Islamic peoples have said that Ezekiel may have been Buddha. And the vision that Buddha received in Ezekiel chapter 1 and chapter 10 is he saw Adam, and around him was a wheel, and within him were wheels, and there were wheels within wheels. And he was literally looking at that same depiction of Buddha sitting with these chakras down his spine. And we covered that the other day. It's identical. That's what the book of Ezekiel's teaching is, teaching about our chakras, the wheels within wheels, of these energy points, which are also the 7 planets, as we said, in the greater temple of the universe. And then there's the temple of the body. As above, so below. But what I'm trying to tell you is that there is somebody on this earth, because it couldn't be anywhere else. The only reality is right here. Heaven is a spiritual thing. It's not a physical thing. There is no other physical reality. And heaven and earth are connected. Go outside if you don't believe me and look up. That's heaven. It's connected to earth, right? And there's holes in the ground, and there is fire down there, and that's symbolic of this deep churning fire that we call the pit of hell, where everything just seems to go back when it dies and disintegrates into the ground. And if you go out to the edge of the earth and you see this big ocean, and you realize that down beneath the ocean you can swim as far as you can swim, and you can't find the bottom, and there's these big monsters down there. We call them whales and octopuses and different kind of monsters. Crazy looking dragons flying around down there. And they're coming up out of the bottomless pit. And so this is all how we're understanding this universe. It's all one whole. So every cell of your body has oxygen all the way to uranium, plutonium. And life flows through from the higher to the lower. There's negative, there's positive. This is the vortice. High pressure or low pressure creates a vortice. And therefore everything is sort of spinning around some grounded place, something that we believe. And your higher consciousness could change what the lower form is. But as long as that form that is being made, that is grotesque, then you have to assume that the mind is not yet understood that it's in charge. Once the higher consciousness starts gaining wisdom, then it begins to influence the lower, and it's made into a paradise. So there are beings or someone's running the show here. If they didn't run things and control it, if that lower ego wasn't afraid and could just let his elder brother guide the higher consciousness, the love, the faith, the integrity, but it requires knowledge, right? The elder brother's got to, in the end, once he's gained all this wisdom and through love, reconcile his brother. Eventually, once we learn and have knowledge, we'll reconcile the lower realm. And it'll be like a marriage, the male and the female. They'll come together, the conscious mind with a higher consciousness, and they'll walk together as one. But that means we've got to grow up, go through the classroom as a child, go through our bar mitzvah or whatever symbols and ceremonies that mile markers we reach where we become mature. And finally, there's the great wedding. And we go off to our own place and build our own home in paradise. Knowing that paradise is the natural conclusion to nature. And nature is a divine mind that is constantly creating the surroundings and growing and learning and choosing what it creates and deciding to pick up the trash and organize and live in peace, learning integrity and control through love and not through violence. And that is how humans will eventually attain unto the kingdom of heaven. But remember, there are no other beings made in Genesis 1 but the fish, the birds, the mammals, then the men, which is in stages. And then finally, the 6th day, we have these animals, and then the grand crown of the creation, the shepherd. Without the shepherd, the sheep will be scattered, friends. So until man came in 6 advancing stages as it advanced, until we got to this intelligence level of a human, the animals were brute. They were scattered. They were hungry. They had no leader. Right? It's like having a body without the head. Right? The body's flopping around, doesn't know where to go. It cannot see, it cannot hear, it cannot speak. The head is required to kind of let the rest of the body know. Now, you know, the head cannot say unto the toe, I have no need of thee. The head couldn't have become the head without first being a fish and then a mammal. Because the Apostle Paul says the Lord gave it a body as it pleased him. First, a bare plant that lives and dies. That's how the Lord made us. That's what the resurrection means. And then there are fish, and then there are birds, and then there are animals, and then we come to man. And man finally gets to a place where he gets a white robe and a crown, and he shepherds the sheep, and there's paradise. And that's what we're going to have. So who are the demons? When did the Lord make the demons? Well, what are demons? They possess people. They're spirits. Well, there are demons like fears and hate and jealousy. But is that all they are? Well, is there a devil? Is there somebody running this world, keeping us in this prison house? What would be the grudge? Why did Jesus come and say, you have the keys of the kingdom, and I'm going to take it from you and give it to somebody else? And why do you say you're offspring of vipers? So who is the original viper? Well, there must have been somebody, right? Well, the Bible tells us that there were certain individuals before the flood that did something wrong. The Apostle Peter and Jude tells us that they forsook not their first estate. And it calls them the angels that fell. Well, if what we've been saying is true, that angels are exalted beings, then they cannot ever fall. Because humans graduate to get their white robe at the end of their class, right? Nowadays, in this world, we're getting black robes. Yeah, we're not advancing. We're getting black robes with different colored tassels every time we get another degree. But we never get the white robe until we get science, not religion, judging and law. It's all black robes. But supposedly the Pope's got a white robe. Well, he's donning the white robe, but he's not really the truth. It's the anti-truth. They're just deceiving us. That's not a clean robe, right? He's got blood on his hands. But the idea is we need a white robe. We need purity. So, if we're all humans and we're all learning by nature, you wouldn't think the Lord have created a world where we would have gotten this far deep in this evil, where we would have chosen to hate our neighbor to this extent. Although we can go back and see that this is the case. I mean, at Mount Sinai, we chose the golden calf and we worshipped it because we're ignorant or lack of knowledge. We have all this fear. But before that happened, wouldn't our Heavenly Father have disciplined us in a more accommodating way? Like, if you have children that are sinning or doing wrong, you want to discipline them, but you wouldn't throw them out in the street, say, there you go, you'll learn the hard way. Look, car will run over you. Oh, there they went. They learned their lesson. And that's probably not the way you would want to train your children. So why are we being given such a hard world where everybody's on drugs? See, this class isn't working. That's why it's coming to an end. And the class we had a teacher. We had somebody leading us. Jesus told us what happened. He said he had a vineyard, which is his people. And he got a hired hand to watch over the vineyard and take care of it, make sure it grows properly, nourish it. A shepherd to shepherd the sheep. So he went away into a far country and came back, and the guy he had, the hired hand, he was beating the sheep and not taking care of the vineyard. It wasn't producing grapes or figs or olives or whatever he was doing. And he said, I'm going to take this away from you, you unfaithful steward, and I'm going to give it to a people producing its fruit. We've got to produce the fruit. So obviously, the way the world is right now, it's not producing fruit, producing bad fruit, and the people that are running us, they're condemned by Christ, and he's going to give it to somebody else. Well, did he do it when he was on the earth? Well, we know that he either did it then and it hasn't fully taken effect. But why would that be? Because so many people were deceived by the devil, the liar, that they chose the devil. So no matter what the Lord does, even if there's a bad leader on the earth that's causing so much havoc, the Lord could come down and stop it, except he cannot go against our will, because we are the divine being as well. We're making decisions, and we're not enlightened enough or ready, or we don't have enough gnosis to make the decision to say, no, we're not going to let that guy rule over us. We haven't grown up. We're like the prodigal son, right? We own the whole thing. We're the heir. That's what he says. He gave him a parable. He says he sent prophets and they killed them all. Finally, he sent his son, and he said, oh, they'll respect my son. But they said, oh, he's the heir. We'll kill him and we'll take it over. That's what they're plotting, friends. That's what's happening in the world. The point is who are these ones that are trying to kill us? We're the heir. Not just Jesus himself, but us. All of us who are the heirs. Why are we all being murdered day after day? Well, many of the children of the world are just little children. They don't know what to do. You can't blame them. But there are some farmhands or some individuals in this whole vineyard that do have knowledge and could probably fix the world. But the devil is killing them whenever they come because he knows they're the heir. And the Lord can't stop that because we have to grow. We have to be a good shepherd, able to kill the wolf and protect the sheep. And we haven't gotten to that point yet, but it takes a long time. Mankind's been going through this whole process. Christ came 2,000 years ago. We're now ready for the kingdom to be born, for the righteous to make a stand and to get rid of the hired hand. But who is the hired hand? If we're all the children of the Lord, who are the demons, as we were saying? Well, there are hordes of demons, the millions and zillions of little hordes, those little parasites that come up out of the bottomless pit. I believe those are fears, hate, jealousy. There's armies, 200 million man army of those that we're having to fight, a spiritual warfare, right? They're not humans, they're spirits, and they're possessing individuals. But there's also an individual, a person that died. Remember, we all get reincarnated. And when people die that are gone astray, they become corrupt and they become dictators and they rule the world with this dictating spirit. And because of what they've done, the Lord disciplines them and says, you're not allowed to incarnate again into that position. I'm going to put you over there. Well, they get angry and they may rebel. Maybe they feel jealous because of ignorance. They don't realize that they just have to cooperate and love, and that, because so they've gotten into this position that the Bible says the devil was in, which is that he was newly appointed. He became, because he was the firstborn, looked around and hadn't enough experience, and he fell because of his pride. Who was that? Well, one of Adam's kids. That represents the fleshly nature. But there must have been an actual person. And he must have had a certain number of individuals that did some very terrible thing, because we hear about this story where Shem, Jaza, and 200 of these angels rebelled. Well, we don't know exactly, but it seems that humans were sent to the earth, Adam and Eve, go through the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and there was something already there at the very beginning. There was already this plot in heaven, that this jealousy, and we know that there's these two seraphim, Satan and Jesus. They were the first two sons of Adam. And one represents the flesh and one represents the spiritual. And one killed his brother, and so we hear these parables and we understand what it means. But remember that there are entities that reincarnate. And why does the Bible call them angels who fell? Because all of us are angels. Angels have white robes and crowns. They're exalted beings. Once you reach that exalted being position where you've got the crown and the white robe, you cannot lose it. So in a sense, there were never any angels that fell. And yet the Bible calls them angels because all humans become angels eventually, after trial, after ages of learning and growing, they attain unto their white robe and their crown. So when it says that you'll see angels descending and ascending upon the Son of Man, it means that the angels that descend don't yet have their white robes. It's calling them angels, but because they will be the angels that eventually get their white robes. But they're descending by incarnating upon the Son of Man. This is where everyone comes. But before we become human, we're spirits. We don't have the physical body. We come to get a body, to learn the material classroom and understand the firm conscious world. We've got to develop the conscious mind. Develop the conscious mind to where it will know good from evil. So we all come down with minds, we're beings, sometimes called angels, but we don't have bodies. We all file down here after Adam and Eve. And the story is just telling you parabolically that there's the flesh and the spirit. But in reality, we do have individuals that became jealous, and they made a pact on Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is that mountain that's in the north, which would be the top of the hill of the world. Mount Ararat or Earth. And the top of Earth or the top of Mount Earth is the top of Mount Zion. And there is where they symbolize it with Polaris, right? It's like a portal at the top of the Mount Zion in the north. And that portal is higher consciousness. And it's reigning over the lower consciousness, the physical realm, the paradise. So it's very symbolic. But yes, there were individuals that were on that mountain originally. And one of them was jealous of his brother. And that was the lower conscious mind. Why did he fall? Because he didn't have experience yet. It was in the beginning. So the angels who fell is all of us. Because Peter says he went his way and preached to the spirits in prison. Taught them the gospel. Why would you preach to the spirits in prison, the angels who fell? Well, wait a minute. Are the angels who fell and imprisoned in Tartarus that Peter talks about in Jude, are they the same as the spirits that are in prison? Because it tells you that the spirits that are in prison were before the flood. So wait a minute. In the days of Noah, people died because the flood came, swept them all away. And so their physical bodies were gone, but they still living in spirit. How could Jehovah's Witnesses and Adventists believe that we don't have a spiritual being that can live apart from this physical body? In other words, the physical body drops off, but we're still alive. But they're in prison. Where is a prison for spirits? Ignorance? What does ignorance do? It causes you to live in this prison house. We know that if a person has the gospel, which is the truth, then they sit on thrones with Christ in heaven. Right? We're enlightened. We get the crown and a white robe, immortality, because we believe and have faith. So we've got to have the gospel for that. Well, was the gospel preached to these spirits in prison, or did Jesus just go down there and say, hey, you're all condemned, you're in this prison because you're going to stay here for all eternity, you little pigs? I don't think so. Jesus didn't preach damnation. But the same writer, Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 6, tells us what was preached. It was the gospel, the good news. Now, it says the good news was preached to the spirits or the dead. They were those who were dead. Well, if death or the dead means unconscious and non-existent, like Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses, then how do you preach to the dead? Right? If they're unconscious, if they're not alive somehow. So they were alive because they heard him preaching. But they were dead because they had died physically in the flood. But their spirit was still alive. Remember, our Bible says they lived, people before the flood, maybe like 1,000 years. So everyone who died before the flood, the dead that he preached to, were spirits in prison. They're us. And this body is the prison. And this is the punishment of all those people that didn't get through the flood. Because we're now being saved in like manner as they were. But who was saved? And how will we be saved? Well, it was only the 8 that were saved by water. And so we're now being saved in like manner by being baptized. Not physically. But it represents that anyone who's going to be saved has to go down through the water in the boat that's got the bitumen. So we are saved as the 8 because we have salvation. We're Christianity. Christ has died for us. It's just a few verses later, and it says after he talks about the spirit that's in prison in chapter 3. In chapter 4, verse 6, he says, and he preached to those that were dead for this reason. So the spirits in prison are the dead, and that's the vast majority of the people before the flood. And so the prison is the mortal exercise, the incarnations, all the different lives that we've all lived. And we keep living these lives. But the dead are those who haven't attained life yet. And so that's why the book of Revelation says the dead do not come to life until the 1,000 years was ended. But the dead are in prison, which is this mortal body. But they don't become alive unless they receive the Holy Spirit and are transformed and have the new covenant. So as Noah was saved in a boat through the water, so all the rest, the dead, which is all of us who are in this prison house, we're also being saved by this baptism or this suffering down through the 3 houses at the bottom of the wheel, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, which is where the water is. And the watering Aquarian man who's baptizing us, who is John, or Anu, or On. Yes, Ano, or Noah, Anu. We all had to go through that. We're the dead by means of going through the baptism that they went through. Meaning they went down into the world and incarnated into mortal flesh. Now they only live a short while in this prison house, in this prison world, being ruled over by this hard taskmaster who is Yahweh. But we know that Jesus preached to them the gospel. And it says that they might be alive according to the Spirit. How would they become alive without knowing the gospel? And that's what it says. He preached the gospel, the good news. So the good news isn't, yeah, you're all damned forever. Bye. The good news is, I died for you. Well, if Jesus is the firstborn, and he's that higher consciousness that came into the world to die in order to learn, and through his death and resurrection, and we're all going to take up our cross and follow him. And so he was the firstborn among many brethren, partaking of flesh and blood, as did his brethren. Then it was his death because he died from the founding of the world and finally was raised at the spring equinox 2,000 years ago and said, it is finished. And when he died, he went his way to hell and preached to the spirits in prison. Well, when was he dead? We've already said that he was crucified from the founding of the world. When was he raised up? Well, when he came to the earth and he spoke the gospel. And so we were all here in this hell for 3 days and nights, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and Christ was down in that hell, in that prison, right? Because if you're a spirit and you got the good news, you ain't going to be in that prison. But the good news wasn't preached until Christ came and overcame death. So we're all in prison as long as we're human, going around and around, being controlled by these bestial natures, these archons, and the demiurge Yahweh, who is the deity of vengeance. He is the hired hand that is made this classroom, which is a school classroom that led to Christ. And so Christ and his brethren, we all, one by one, came down into this world. We were Christ. We were with Christ from the founding of the world. And we were in Christ. And we were spiritual beings. And we were also called angels because we're the ones that's going to eventually go down and come back up and get our white robe and our crown. Jesus got a crown, the highest crown, that in the name of Jesus every knee shall bend. He received a name that is above every other name, whether on earth or in heaven. But his brethren all did the same thing, and we will do greater works than him, and we are part of his body. And so the good news was preached when Enoch wrote it in the temple pyramid walls, when it was written in the sky, that we would all go down through the flood of Noah, which is January, right? John, Anu, the Aquarian man, the man with the water pitcher that was baptizing us, that's on the way to the upper room at Pentecost, or the Passover into the upper room. So Jesus, the higher consciousness, was preaching to the spirits in prison while those 3 days and 3 nights were going on. For 6,000 years, at least, while we were transmigrating and incarnating into this world, into this prison. We were living in this prison. Can you imagine that this verse is not a symbol, just like many other places in the Bible that you have to interpret, that you have to understand? It's not going to give you all the details, just the highlights, and it's kind of in a parabolic form that it's not like there's some place in the universe where there's this crowd of beings, spirits, all that ever lived, millions and millions, or who knows. And they don't have bodies. They're spirits in some kind of prison. No, the prison for the spirit is the body. And Jesus was crucified from the founding of the world, the firstborn of many brethren, and the first to partake of flesh and blood. But his brethren partook of the flesh and blood as well. And it's through the partaking of the flesh and blood, which is what? Our mother Eve partaking of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, and being banished into this world of consequences and suffering, of being under the law, under this curse of Yahweh, the vengeful deity, who will not pardon your sins under the third and the fourth life. We'll go round and round and round to learn our lesson until the proper sacrifice is made, or we get rid of this fleshly nonsense and we hear the gospel and we awaken that Christ nature again, and he raises up, this time with a white robe, meaning his body's immortal, and he gets a crown, and he's going to be permanently having dominion over the animals, because that's what we were to have in Genesis chapter 1, have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and the animals. And we will then have our dominion, and that will be that shepherd child that leads these animals in harmonious felicitude. So, if everybody who ever lived is in a prison in this body, and we're waiting for the good news so that we can be released and get our white robes and our crowns and become the angels, then we know who angels are. Angels are exalted men. And who are demons? Well, if there are any entities that are manipulating these hordes of parasitic fear, lust, hate, these spirits, but if they're actual beings, then they were certain individuals who sinned and who were caught up in this, what Paul says, they were newly appointed, or they were not aware, not intelligent, didn't have gnosis, and they fell through pride. And so there is some child on the earth. And who is it? Well, we've got 12 of these natures. There's 12 houses. Judas represents the tribe of Judah, and they were the ones that were represented by this viper. They were the ones who said, "Let his blood be upon us and our children." They were the ones that Jesus said, "You will not see me henceforth until you say, 'Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord.'" They were the one that was the caretaker, the hired hand. See, that wasn't the birthright holder, Joseph, who was the son of Jacob's favorite wife, Rahel, right? Light, the truth, the spiritual child, Rahel, right? But no, they were of the woman Leah, the old covenant. And we got her first, that covenant. We were supposed to get Rahel first, but that covenant, that marriage, but we got Leah. And Leah's firstborn son was Reuben. And then it was like Levi, and there's several kids, but her lastborn son was Judah. This is the last kid born. The youngest, not the oldest. Therefore, he has no experience. And in his pride, he sold his brother Joseph into Egypt for money. And so it's a parable. Who is running the world? It's certainly not some spirit being other than spirits that are incarnated in the world in this prison. And they're the prison guard. And they're beating us with whips and keeping us in this prison by lies and deception. But they will themselves repent. They will themselves confess, and every knee shall bend, every tongue shall confess. And the book of Zechariah makes it very clear that Christ will never come back with a higher consciousness and that enlightened truth until that deception is removed and they finally recognize their Lord and Savior. Everyone will be saved. So who's going to be thrown into the bottomless pit? Well, that is not forever. It's an age of suffering, and they've been going through it. A certain age where there is certain sufferings and punishments for what people do in order to reform them. It's not eternal fire, it's age lasting. Anyway, we're way over an hour. I want to get into that whole issue. We're going to explain what demons, angels, who's running the world, and in probably the next video. But I just gave you a little wet your whistle on what the Bible's really teaching about who's running this world, whether there's aliens out there or whatever. It's just some family on earth. And why is this family doing this to us? Well, we'll find out in tomorrow's video, friends. Hope you have a wonderful evening. May the Lord bless you. He will bless you. He loves you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.